Today, I'm going to be talking about how survival is your biggest threat, or surviving is your biggest threat. What's up, Ann? So, I'm not sure if there's some conspiracy against me saying stuff because I started to make this video and then the app wouldn't work for some reason. But here we are. And I'm going to talk to you about something that's going to make absolutely no sense if your priority in life is to survive. And this is the idea that your brain often works against all of your higher knowings because your brain's preoccupied, prioritizes, and is only focused on keeping your body alive. And because it's prioritized on that, it does not know how to contemplate, consider, or convey ideas. You see, I'm doing a lot of alliteration, ideas that come from the consciousness of eternal or eternality, or if that's a word. So basically, you can't contemplate eternal things from the point of view of your brain because your brain is always focused on survival. And because your brain is focused on survival, it will always tell you what it thinks you need to hear in order to survive. And here's the big kicker: the proof that your brain is right to your brain is the fact that you're still alive. So basically, your brain tells you, I must be doing something right. I'm still alive. And so that is the number one reason why most of the time we find it very difficult to change, because change means letting go of one aspect of who you are so that you can live into another aspect of who you are, or transformation probably would be a more accurate term. Hi, Mother Road and Kathy. So today, as I was mentioning, I'm talking about how surviving is your biggest threat, and it's how your brain is programmed to try to survive. And there are four main survival instincts that we talk about. And I think about, know, and have contemplated about seven to eight more, which I will outline in another post. Hopefully, it'll be done tomorrow. I've been working on it for a while. It's basically this idea that we're surviving ourselves to death. And so the four basic ones that most of us know, and many of us don't even know four, most of us know three. If you feel like putting it in the chat, if your fingers can move that fast, or if you're on the computer and you can type that fast, what are the four main survival instincts? And I'll wait a few seconds, and if no one types anything, then I will just start saying them. But I'm pretty sure most of y'all know them. So I'll give it a couple seconds. Make this little music for you. Do, 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 do. Okay. So, seeing nothing typed, I will say that the main three that people know about are fight, flight, and freeze. And there's a fourth one that's fawn. But a lot of times people don't know about fawn. Almost every time I bring fawn up in public speaking or something like that, oh, that Ann put it in there. So when people hear those, they usually can identify with the top three. Fawn, they have a difficult time identifying with because it's not commonly spoke of. But just for you to know, fight is obvious. Hey, and I'm the type of person, my basic instinct is to fight. Then that is basically manifests as challenge. I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. If you know anything about it, it comes off as challenging systems, structures, and things like that. And so I am a more of a fighter. And then the next type is flee, which basically means I'm taking off, I'm get out of the situation as soon as I possibly can because I want to survive. Oh, Ann said I've also heard FUCK or F asterisk CK. That's a good one. I would cuss and say it out loud, but my uncle saw my last video and told me that I cuss too much. So I'm trying to honor that. So at any rate, flee is very obvious, it's taken off. And then freeze is getting frozen, sticking your head in the sand like an ostrich is usually what I think about. People thinking that if they just don't look at it, it's not happening. We see a lot of that in America right now. I will not comment on that. And then the last one is fawn. Now, fawn is a very, very interesting survival instinct. Fawn, surprisingly, is sometimes you'll see people looking like the biggest fan of maybe an authoritarian or something like that. And you'll think like, wow, this person's a true believer. They're not really a true believer. They actually can't stand the person that they seem to be aligning with. They are terrified of that person. They wish that person would probably die, but they can't admit it to themselves because they're afraid of their own death. And because they're afraid of their own death, their survival instincts will tell them, in order to survive, I have to fawn over this person that's endangering me. And it's one of the reasons why we see a lot of people deal with a lot of things that you'll say to yourself, why in the world do they keep putting up with that? Why do they keep going against their own best interests? Why is it that no matter how much evidence they get, they keep on going along with this thing? That is an exaggerated fawn response that has gone into the level of psychosis because the person is so terrified of dying or being on the tail end or of whatever progress societies kind of go for, that they will go along. They will go along as much as possible because they think this will keep me alive. Like if you see a black Trump supporter or yo, you're not afraid of death, and that's why you're awesome, Robert. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. That's another element that I'll get into. But basically, when people are stuck in those responses, they basically can't help it. Their brains will shut down for all intents and purposes to any new information that seems like it's a threat to their survival. The least likely to do that would be the fighter, because the fighter understands that the consequence of fighting may lead to their death. So they're less likely to fall into those other categories of flee, freeze, and fawn. And they usually almost detest people who freeze and fawn, and they're not much fans of people who flee. Now, I'm not saying that any of the survival instincts are wrong. I used to judge other people's ways of surviving. And the reason why I judged other people's ways of surviving, as I mentioned in previous posts, is because at a very young age, I thought that there was no way I was going to survive. So survival stopped being a consideration of the decisions I made in life. And my considerations were more so, let me die with my back straight. Martin Luther King Jr. said that no one can ride your back unless you first bend it. And I totally aligned myself with that. He also said that there's some things to which we should be maladjusted, like racism, sexism, all these other things. And so all of those systems that were seemingly standardized in our society, I rejected those systems under the belief of what Martin Luther King Jr. said, and said, I'm maladjusted to these things, but there's a reason to be maladjusted to them. And then because the people that I revered the most had been shot in the head or killed or whatever the case may be, I just did not aspire to live a long life. That was just not in my consciousness. And so I was looking at the other survival instincts, and I would sometimes say, hey man, death is an option, and I would prefer that over the things that other people are doing. And some people felt that that was pretty harsh, and I understand why. And as I've lived longer and reflected on things, I've come to understand not only that I probably can't judge people for the ways that they survive when their brains are prioritizing survival, but also in order for me to my genetic material to have survived long enough for me to exist in the first place, I probably had a lot of people that did those other survival instincts. Because if everyone had the survival instinct of fight that I had, I wouldn't even exist now. I'm sure I had some sellout, shucking and jiving, yassa boss, master's boss type ancestor that did what he had to do or she had to do so that I could be here now. And so because I've admitted that to myself, that there must have been somebody, because I know there's no way that people who with my mentality would have survived slavery and some of those other situations, I have to find a way of honoring those ancestors who had survival instincts that didn't jibe with my own. And interestingly, the only reason that I actually came to that awareness is because sometimes I do stand up comedy, and I had intentions of doing a stand up comedy set where I was going to joke some people who do have that survival instinct. And then my brain said to myself, well, probably it was somebody in your line has that instinct. And I thought about my own grandmother, who, if you read my previous written post, we are educated into sabotage. I talk about how my grandmother told me tell white people I was Portuguese so that they would treat me better, and really pushed that I wasn't really black. And my cousins and other family members would tell me I wasn't really black because my dad was a Portuguese citizen. And so they, buying into the white supremacy mindset, tried to get me to adopt some of their fears. And I realized, well, if my grandmother did that, my grandma probably had some of that fawning mentality. And I know that she was kind of like a Republican. And if she were still alive, um, it looks like maybe I froze for a second. if my grandmother was still alive, there's a chance that she would probably be a Trump supporter, and I had to honor that and dig inside of myself and bear witness to that. So we've covered the four basic survival instincts and how they sometimes may run into challenges with one another, because what some people have unconsciously assumed, because of the fact that they're still alive, that their survival instincts must be right, because their very fact that they're alive is proof to them that their survival instincts are right. And it also is proof to them that people who don't have their same survival instincts are wrong. And so a person who freezes may have a problem with a person who fights or fawns or flees because of the attraction it might bring to them, and vice versa. And I've discovered that along my life, because I had lots of people who thought I brought trouble on them, and I didn't understand why, especially in the community I grew up in. And it was because my survival instincts contradicted their survival instincts, and they were trying to pull me into this instincts that they thought kept them alive. And because I wasn't cooperating, they pushed me out and rejected like the way that I was showing up. But now that I don't judge their survival instincts as much, I can now honor that and make different decisions. So hopefully, if I'm frozen, I guess if I'm frozen, you can't tell me I'm frozen. But if I'm unfrozen, can someone tell me that I'm unfrozen? Anyway, I'll continue. So, what I'm going to introduce in the next piece, which is going to be We Are Surviving Ourselves to Death, is I'm going to introduce a lot of other survival instincts that people don't often think of as survival instincts. Some of them are going to be things like fun. Fun is a survival instinct. If you ever met a person who every time something is uncomfortable, they start turning into a joke really quickly, that's a survival instinct. All these ones start with F's. So, fun. I'm going to introduce focus, and that's a person who, when they are in survival instincts, they will get hyper focused and hyper attentive to certain things so that they can, escape or whatever it is they think they have to do. That's another one I'll be adding to it. I'll be adding falsify or fake, because some people will act fake in order to survive, and so on and so on. And there's like three other F's that I'll be introducing, and I've been working on this for probably about 3 or 4 years, maybe more than that, talking about the survival instinct. But there were certain ways that I was not able to fully articulate it, so I didn't want to present it to people. But since I've been studying the Enneagram, I've been finding ways of kind of articulating these other survival instincts that people think of as more progressive, more enlightened, and we don't even think of them as survival instincts at all. But I'm going to position that they are survival instincts that we also have to pay attention to, and that people also look at other people's ways of surviving and then judge them, and then that actually perpetuates some of the systems that of violence and other things that we see occurring in our world. And actually, one of the things that really transformed me around this was one of my dear friends wrote a poem, and it talked about some choices that she made that some people would have thought were irresponsible. But in the end of the poem, she said, "Don't judge me for how I have chosen to survive." And when I heard that, it actually got me to cry, actually, because it helped me to understand a whole bunch of other people, and that's just how they chose to survive. Or maybe they didn't choose it, they just adapted to it because of the environment and things that they've been in. So, what I hope from that piece is I will invite people to consider that there are multiple ways of surviving. None are better than the other in moment to moment, but none of them are also exclusive that you should apply them to every situation. And then we should also be able to determine when we're not under threat and when we actually are. Because one of the negative things about surviving is that often we only know how to engage the world from a point of view of survival. And because we engage the world from a point of view of survival, we often manufacture conditions that give us the opportunity to continue to live from that survival instinct. And so a fighter is always looking for a fight. A fleer is always looking for something to run away from. A fawner is always kissing booty. A freezer just doesn't do anything and can't make decisions. And the other ones that I'll break down in the piece will give you more insight into what it is I'm talking about. My ultimate aim of sharing these, besides giving people opportunities to think about the choices that they make and how they survive and whether it's applicable or not applicable, is also to move from that place of surviving to thriving. And that is going to be housed in a meta container that I'm calling freedom. I'm not inventing the word freedom, obviously, but the meta container of freedom is that in a moment to moment, you can access the different ways of surviving, trust your brain to keep you alive a little bit, but then to thrive and expand beyond that, that just kind of amygdala response, and then move into a more aware state so that you can be at choice and have discernment and all these other things so that we can create better communities. Because right now, the world that we're creating is basically that survival of the fittest paradigm, and everybody thinks that their way of surviving is the way to do it, and anyone who thinks differently, approaches the world differently, is seen as a threat. And we can't keep going on like that. Some people can, but I'm not going to. And I would love to continue to engage with and create community with people who want to move beyond survival into thriving, and to create thriving communities, not just one to one, which is an awesome thing. But when we get together, in the Bible, it says that when two or more are gathered in Christ's name, Christ is there also. And I want to submit to you that when two or more conscious people get together, it creates a vibrating field of a relationality and awareness that expands, and more people can engage in that field of awareness and grow into who they are, grow into greater senses of awareness, become more whole beings. Not that we aren't already whole, but become more conscious of our wholeness and create from a place of wholeness, create from a place of abundance, create from a place of eternal consciousness, as opposed to merely trying to keep our body alive and coming up with justifications for systems for our particular way of surviving. Because right now, what we see is a lot of people who are stuck in like that threat mode, who always are looking for a war, always looking for a fight, and their whole identity is wrapped up in that. And a lot of us are paying the consequences. And those of us who have less aggressive styles of surviving don't know how to work together to create a better coalition so that we can show people that there's actually more than enough for everyone, and we don't have to keep doing this mess. So my hope as a fighter is to bring into the field of awareness a less judgmental way of looking at how other people survive, so that there's enough of safety and community that people can then create from a different state of consciousness. If that makes sense, and if you're still hearing me, because the last message I saw was Ann saying that it was freezing, but it looks like you all are still here. But if you have heard anything I said, I invite you to hit like a heart or something like that to acknowledge it. Or I'll assume that I'm just saying a bunch of stuff and no one's hearing it. And then I'll just take it as the universe telling me that I needed to say it for myself, and that perhaps there is a conspiracy to keep me from saying this stuff. I don't really think there is, but I have found that there have been instances where I want to share stuff like this and my computer crashes, the post I wrote disappears, something like that. I don't want to believe, but we do have the technology to stop me from saying stuff that really isn't that big a deal, because it's not anything that spiritual people haven't been saying forever. But because I can't tell if people are still hearing this, because I don't see any comments and I don't see any hearts, I'm going to assume that people saw this. And I will just say, stay tuned. This whole video right now is just a precursor to the piece that I'm going to be putting out. And I haven't been able to make any videos or anything, because I've been writing on this other piece. So I want to just give folks a heads up that I'm creating something, and then inviting you to check it out. So I'm gonna assume you heard it. If you didn't hear it, I'll find out when I try to upload the post. I'll find out that no one's here, and I will have learned. And I don't know. I'll just kind of go from there. But thank you if you are here. I appreciate you, and I guess I'll say sayonara. Take care.